The Holy Gospel according to Mark. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And Jesus said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to Jesus, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They replied, "We are able." Then Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. But whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Sisters and brothers, there are two kinds of movies that I do not watch: animated cartoons and horror flicks. Now, there's no huge reason, I just don't like either genre. However, the films that I do watch often come with previews, and horror stories make regular appearances, always with even more odd creatures and pervasive violence. They seem somehow a kind of glut on the market. Some time ago, I saw previews of an offering that included a scene where everything in the area was sucked into a vortex, much like you might vacuum dust from a living room rug. And while I wasn't interested in the film, I was fascinated by the process, where objects and creatures were swallowed up and transported to some uncertain future. Now, that image stuck with me, and it surfaced when I read through the first reading for the day. You will have to allow me a few moments to make the connection. In the first reading, Isaiah is writing about the suffering servant whose life is forfeit for the sake of the brokenness of the world. For our Jewish sisters and brothers, the suffering servant is Israel, the people that were chosen to represent God in the world, a world which never acknowledged God and was never respectful of Israel's piety and its commitments. Israel kept faith with God in the hope that others would catch on. That didn't happen as much as God would have liked. Christians see God as having to try again. And this time, God taking the risk of becoming a human being like we are, subject to the joys and the sorrows of humanity, and vulnerable to innocent suffering. Isaiah's word is understood among us as a picture of Jesus. Innocent of all crime, Jesus was murdered along with criminals. Never self-protective, Jesus was willing to endure the worst in order to make God's best possible. Always nonviolent, Jesus allowed violent people to do him great harm. Now that partnership of innocent suffering and Jesus' cross have always occupied center stage in the drama of God's saving work. The problem is that American piety has often reduced the cross to dashboard size. It's a very nice Jesus doing something wonderful to save me from consequences that I could not escape or bear, or cross-bearing when persons get afflicted by something really awful through no fault of their own. It's all really personal, and that isn't all bad. Personal salvation has a place. I would like to be saved. I suppose you would too. And awful stuff does victimize innocent ones who do not deserve it. But dear ones, the cross is much larger in significance and impact than only personal. A word like cosmic could be attached as an adjective for Jesus' cross, except that even cosmic is too small an adjective. Eternal barely covers it. The cross is both inside and outside of history, and it touches absolutely everything. Now, it is at this point that I want to make the connection between the earlier reference to the vortex in the horror film. I also want to quit coughing and quit smoking and quit a lot of other things, but none of those can happen right at the moment. Jesus' cross is that moment when God takes everything that was or is or ever will be and draws it into God's refining love. Evil gets separated and doesn't have any future. Evildoers have hearts and minds purified so that they can take a place in the new creation. Good is made better as God multiplies its effects and continues the good into God's future. And decent people get to rejoice that choices and commitments they made went along right pathways for God's name's sake. Brokenness, all of it, is made subject to God's restoring love. People become whole again. The creation becomes whole again. That is the cross as vortex. Life drawn into God's presence in the eternal and cosmic moment of Jesus' crucifixion. Life transformed into what God and humanity needs it to be. Now, if you have stayed with me this far, you may be thinking that I have taken continuing education courses in obtuse. Well, I have not. And if you will be patient a little longer, I think the rubber of this sermon may hit the roads where you and I travel. Now, I read the papers and listen to NPR, and the news is often unsettling. I would be happier if I could be indifferent to all of the stuff that happens, but that escapes me. Oh, bless your heart. Thank you. They say that people who drink alone have problems. Thanks to Les, I'll make an exception in that rule. I'm not sure what happens to you, but when I live with all of this stuff, sometimes it gets absolutely overwhelming. You kind of want to pull the covers over your head and hope that the world will go away for a while. Innocent people are murdered in schools. A youngster dies from an injury in a game. People make terrible mistakes and disaster results. The creation goes crazy and flooding kills people. Disease takes away the one that you have loved for decades. Talented people squander their opportunities and their futures because of addictions or bad judgment. Greed animates this country, and compassion is forgotten. People tell lies, and they don't even blush. And impeccable evidence is dismissed because it does not match hardened assumptions. People set off bombs in places like this with the clear intent only to terrorize people. And the list could go on. And how do you sing, "This is my Father's world," when so much is twisted beyond recognition? I can't always. And in those moments, that hurts a great deal. Now, mercifully, God is not a fair weather God. God comes into the midst of everything that is ugly and speaks the word and lifts high the cross so that it can be seen. And God whispers that you and I, who have experienced so much awful stuff, need to understand that that has been absorbed into Jesus' cross. For surely he has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases. He was wounded for our transgressions and for our iniquities. Now that doesn't make pain any less. Jesus is hurt and we are hurt. But Jesus' pain and our pain are touched by the reality that God's love is active in confronting ugliness, and nothing overcomes the power of God's love. Nothing. And then comes a little easier to breathe, a little easier. And by the power of God's Spirit, that life-giving space leads to the possibility of life renewed in us and among us. Now, happiness may have to wait a little while longer, but joy is already moving to take a place in our heads and in our hearts. And that joy makes friends with all the good and decent stuff that is also in the world. You can see the peacemakers who are working against the odds, the merciful who reach out to the beaten down ones, good people who care for themselves and their families and then for so many others. Art becomes exciting again. The colors more vibrant, the images lift hearts and minds. Music, you can listen again, and it takes us out beyond ourselves like a fresh breeze on a hot summer day. And a morning sun and a night's rest are embraced as the gifts that they are. And a little child takes a first step, and you wonder, will that be the one who will walk with us into new and creative human possibilities? And things start to work when before they had just been speed bumps. And in all of that, dear ones, living becomes possible again. Escapism doesn't work, but it doesn't have to, because it's possible to look life straight in the face, because that life has been sucked into the vortex of Jesus' cross. The suffering servant has served each of us and has served all of us. And in the end, it becomes almost possible to sing, even possible to sing, "This is my Father's world." May it please God that the gospel be in our heads, on our lips, and in our hearts. Amen.